Dara Road on the Hexagon, India Gate Hexagon, and we are primarily a state house, but we also have an art and culture hub for which I am the program director. So we have a lot of events. We coordinate with ICCR and the embassies, and so primarily related to museums and institutions and events. But then I wanted to pursue masters so that there's more skill added to my profession. That's why I
Oh,
joined this
I
course.
will request Dr. to visit if he visits.
Definitely,
Sir, you should come, sir.
No, I'll be in Delhi next week, so we might end up, visiting some.
Please, आइए. We have some wonderful food outlets, restaurants.
Oh,
We have the Chor Bazaar,
that's
which is a
that
Kashmiri
will,
outlet. Then we have the Diggin, which is an Italian outlet. We have L'Opera, which is a French outlet. And of course, the Haldiram of our own, of all the snacks.
nice, nice.
So I am tempting you to please visit
Yeah,
Victory House.
and we might give a surprise.
Yes, sir, that will be nice. That will be
Yeah,
really nice.
very true, very true.
Sir, if I may be just excused and I'll just be out of the camera and I'll keep myself mute. I'm just having a call. Okay,
Okay,
sir.
please, please.
Namaskar, sir.
Yes.
So, sir, happy to see you after a very long time.
Sir, Dr. Saab, it has been almost more than a year, I think.
More than a year, yes.
You left last year when?
September. I left September.
September.
But we met much earlier than September.
Yes. So you are now staying permanently at Karnal?
Permanently, Karnal. I used to go in fortnight
Okay.
or some holiday occasions.
So how is it doing? Operating for Chandigarh from Karnal. How is it doing?
Very difficult question. I'm not able to respond properly because साम्राज्य कहीं और है किंगडम कहीं और है.
राजधानी कहीं और है.
Yes, sir.
चलिए sir. All.
We have to cope up the arrangement of university.
Yeah, very true, sir. Yes, very true.
So, sir, take your time.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Dr. Saab. It was a good meeting, and you are as lively as ever.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And it always encourages us also, to be happy, cheerful, in whatever circumstances may be.
Okay, sir. Good day, sir.
Okay, dear. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Dr. Saab. I would, continue with the session. Piali is back, and maybe other learners might also be joining shortly. So I would take a recapitulatory session for a while because we discussed yesterday a very important issue, that was the instructional design. So instructional design is an integral part of the functioning of distance education. As all of us know that instructional design in the face-to-face can be modified easily, and there can be certain experiments with it. But if we talk about the open and distance learning, it is very difficult to once designed. Once we have a design which is there, then it is very difficult to change it or to replace it more often, because everything is planned accordingly, and there is a system sequence, there is a synthesizing activity, there are resources which have been specifically created for the instructional design that is once approved for open and distance learning. So it is very difficult to change it frequently. So in that concern, in that view, I would like to discuss with our learners that The instructional design is one such activity which is given most, I mean, one can say the huge emphasis, because the entire outcome, learning outcome, or the success of the learners is dependent on the instructional design. If it is not according to the needs of the learners, according to the needs of the distance education, open education, then perhaps our whole teaching learning process might suffer. So therefore, it is very important as a distance learners to understand, and because you are the student of the Master of Arts in Distance Education, so you should very clearly and very objectively understand as to what instructional design is and why it is there, what are its purposes, and what are the different instructional designs. So we discussed all these things yesterday. We discussed the concept. So I will go through it briefly, and then we might go to the next block, because that is also there to discuss with you. So what is instruction primarily? Design is putting thing in a specific order. So instruction is something. It is an arrangement of information and in such an environment to facilitate the learning. So if in layman's point of view, in very simpler terms, we try to understand it, then it's a deliberate arrangement of learning conditions, which promote the attainment of the goal which is intended. So that would mean that it's basically conscious planning of the learner environment and conditions which promote the attainment of the goal that is there, that is the learning, what we have thought of to achieve from this learning. For achieving that aim, there is a conscious planning of conditions and environment. So primarily it would mean that it is a conscious arrangement which will facilitate the learning. So that is one thing. Sorry, there was a little interruption in my phone, so I couldn't continue and I had to break. There are a lot of issues today. We have very bad weather here.
And we had a heavy rainfall last evening at night also, and all network problem. We are all on hotspot right now. We don't have internet connection.
It is becoming very difficult. It's raining like anything.
Yeah, I mean it's become unpredictable weather right now,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the monsoons have arrived very early, I
It,
guess.
it seems so. It seems so. It seems so.
So
Okay.
but sir, you are in Shimla.
I am I am presently in Shimla, but shall be visiting Delhi next week.
I see. Okay, 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 okay.
So, as I was talking, before the interruption, so we
Ji, sir.
discussed yesterday the instructional design, and let me just share with you that instructional design in open and distance learning is very, very important. Reason being, the whole process of teaching, learning, as well as the desired objective of learners' attainment, which is achievement of the or passing out the programs, courses which they have enrolled into. And in a way we can say that the all the aims and objectives, all the targets are entirely attached to the instructional design that distance open and distance education institute will adopt. So in that sense it is very, very crucial in open and distance learning. So as a student of Master of Arts, I think in the open and distance mode, the topic is of great importance, but at the same time, perhaps for better understanding of the system, it is very important that really we put great emphasis, great importance to the instructional design. As I was mentioning, it's quite interesting. What is instruction? I think in the very beginning. So we discussed it yesterday, but I will just go through briefly through this again. Instruction is basically, it's a deliberate arrangement of certain conditions, certain circumstances in
Sir,
which
if I may stop you, this is the instructional design of block two, right, sir? We are going with?
we are going with the block two. Yes,
Yes, and we are starting with the first unit, right, sir?
this is first unit. Yeah,
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
yeah, yeah. So the it is basically to facilitate the learners goal, learners achievements, or what we may call it learning. Essentially, it is learning, and when the learning is facilitated by creating an environment, creating circumstances, so that is called the instructional design. So instructional design is required because without any instructional design, our teaching learning process can derail, it can go hayward, and we might end up, achieving nothing. So keeping all these things in mind, I think it is very important that the instructional design as proposed by various thinkers, I think that works very well in the open distance learning. So very first need or purpose of the instructional design is to focus the attention of on the goals. Because we have certain goals, we would like to receive a particular certificate, diploma, or degree. So that would not happen if we don't have the proper instructional design. So that means if we have instructional design, then everything is clear. We know what will be the different strategies, what will be the role of media, and what will be the various components, because in a short while we will also come to CDT, and then models, constructivistic model, the behavioristic model, and other models like Azure, etc. we will discuss. So, considering all these things, it is very important that we have instructional design because that helps us to focus on the goal. Number two, it helps us to formulate a action plan. It helps us to formulate an action plan. Action plan is what we are going to do, how to do that activity. Because if we are transacting classroom teaching, then I think we must have action plan. The teacher will have a plan that he will teach this particular section first, then there will be next section, then there will be next section, and this plan might have certain parameters, because in a little while we will come to know that if we talk about the CDT, then there is a plan that means simple to complex, or maybe like one single concept to multiple concepts. So these are all things, the issues there which have been discussed in the instructional design. Thirdly, it is a communication and coordination, because if we have instructional design, means we have planned how to transact our instructions, then we can know very clearly as to what will be communicated, how do we communicate, what will be the process of communication, and how to organize all these activities which are relating to the communication. And finally, this is very important, that if we do not have an instructional plan, we might do one thing today, next thing tomorrow, then day after tomorrow we might end up adding some other dimension which will be not there previously. So what happens by all these haywardness, by all these diversions, that we do not integrate our learning in a systematic manner, and we do not end up attaining or achieving anything. So that means we have wasted the resources that we had with us. So it means the instructional design is required to avoid the wastage. Now this is what all about the instruction. So if we talk about the instructional design, this is instructional design. Basically, it is to understand and improve and apply the methods of instructions. We have various methods of instructions. So when we actually apply those methods, implement those methods, that is the design. So instructional design is basically, technically, if we call it, it's creating a detailed layout plan, layout specifications, certain parameters for development, evaluation, and maintenance of situation. That means we must have at hand a complete detailed plan as to what our objectives are, what are the aims, how to go about achieving those aims, what will be the media, what will be the format, what will be the form of study material, whether it is print, whether it is online, whether it's in a digital form, or what will be the approaches adopted in the transacting the design. So all these things are very clearly, very explicitly, outlined in the instructional design. So that means it's a very holistic approach to make things very clear as to what one has to do, how to do, when to do, what to do, and how to avoid a situation which might occur. So that means in a good instructional plan, it is also envisaged what problems can there be and how to deal with those problems. So all these things are there in the instructional design. Then there are, role of the instructional designer, what the designer will do. So we will go to one particular very important issue of instructional design, that characteristics of a good instructional design model. And maybe we will also discuss few theories. So first of all, instructional design, if we go about making an instructional design, we must have very good survey, good research work, good analytical study of the program, of the activity that we would like to do, complete or execute. And then we must have the proper identification of the learning outcomes. That means it has to be very clearly defined what will be the learning outcomes, means what will the learners learn after completing this particular activity. So besides, there has to be proper analysis of the various components, and also the person who will conduct the activity, his or her qualifications, and various studies about the members of the instructional design team. So that means it has to be a study of the resources, of the objectives, of approaches, of team that would be involved in it. So in a way, it's a very comprehensive work to prepare instructional design, and there has to be very detailed study of our entire endeavor, because only then we can plan the activities in an objective manner. So, one very good model which has been there, it is Gagne's 9 events model. So, instruction. I mean, why there is instruction? So Gagne has given 9 events. So what are the 9 events? These are the gain attention. So if we have the good instructional design, that means the properly framed out instructional design, so then it will help us to gain attention. That means it will help us to focus the attention of the learner as to what to read, how to read, and what will be the outcomes of his or her learning. Secondly, it can very clearly apprise the learner as to what his or her goals are. And thirdly, it will very importantly in the 9 point stages that Gagne has given, 9 events. Piali, are you there? Hello. Piali, are you there? Piali, are you there? I think there must be some audio issue, but I'll continue. And this very important point is to integrate the prior learning of the student or the learner. Because if we know what has been the background of the learner, social background, cultural background, educational background, work environment background, then we can plan our activity, we can design a model which would be making room for integrating the prior learning. Similarly, we can prepare the learning material properly if we have proper survey of the learner's background and a detailed study of the objectives of the program. Similarly, it can also be a good guiding factor for the learner. If we have properly designed instructional design, then if they share it with the learner will be able to know as to what is to be done at what point of time and so forth. So at the same time, it is also like enhancing and retaining the transfer. So it is enhancing the retention of the learner. That means the whatever learner learns, it would be easier to retain the learning or the knowledge, and then if it is properly designed, then the learner would be able to transfer the learning. That means the learner will be able to properly contribute to the society on the basis of the learning that one has taken from any academic endeavor or academic program. So this we have already discussed yesterday. I think I would like to recapitulate briefly the Azure model. Azure model is very important model, and this model is basically analyze, select, then state, then utilize, then requirement, and finally the evaluation. So this Azure model has been there in the discussion for a very long time. Reason being that what Gagne has said, there are 9 events in the instruction. So if we have all those 9 events, then ultimately what we do proper analysis of our circumstances, the learning objectives, the learner's behavior, learner's prior knowledge, and on that basis we select an appropriate design, and then we state the objectives, and then we take advantage of our instructional design and utilize the available resources, maybe in terms of media, maybe in terms of study material, maybe in terms of any other learning apparatus that we have with us. So if we talk about Azure model, this is one model which has been in the process for very long with the open and distance learning, and this model is primarily a model which is similar to Gagne's 9 events, as I just now mentioned, because it also begins with analysis or analyzing the objectives, learners learning objectives, as well as the learner's goal. So this works very well because it provides detailed guidelines to the learners as to what his or her layout of the entire learning endeavor is. So ultimately it ends in the evaluation of the learners, what learner has learned through this program. Uh, then we also spoke briefly yesterday about the constructivistic instructional design model. As we discussed day before yesterday, constructivist instructional design model is one model which talks about the context, the activities. Only difference here is that it talks about the context and activities in terms of concretized or the form of activities. Uh, the activities which have to be there, they should be finally decided, or we can say authentic activities, authentic context that might reflect the knowledge that is applied in the real life. Because constructivist model of learning, first we learned about learning, and then we learned about the instruction. So if we have in the learning, the constructivist approach says that a learner learns a lot from the real life situation. So if we have real life situation which are concretized, because they should not be temporary or flimsy, they should be formed up, and from those taking cue, if there is a plan, there is instructional design, then the learning will be more beneficial, more objective. Similarly, there are multiple roles and perspectives of the learners which have to be provided space in the instructional design. so that they are properly integrated and new knowledge is brought to the transactions of the contents. That will help not only one particular learner, but perhaps a group of learners can benefit from the experiences which and the roles and the perspectives which one learner has about the uh, learning or the study. So this was Azure's model, and about the constructivist model, I think we have to go a little back where we learned about the constructivist model of learning. So as happens in the learning, that it's a basically design and development process in a specific context. When we come to the instructional design, it is with regard to specific context. So keeping in view the specific context, the instructional designer also uses the reflective practices. So what is reflective practices? Reflective practices are the impressions, are the experiences of the learners in practice. That means it is in doing. Say for example, if a teacher is teaching in the classroom and the learners are also doing some activity, then how do teaching reflects on the learners? So this is very important. It is a kind of reflection in the action. So this reflection in action is also one cue, or rather we can say is also one basis for formulating a good instructional design. So all these issues we have discussed yesterday, and then we also discussed the component display theory. So component display theory is another concept or another issue. Component display theory is basically meant to systematically plan the activities, and we have to take into account various contexts and and also the performances as to how the learner will learn, in what type of conditions will learn, what will be the approach, because when we talk about the CDT or the component of the display theory, then we come to know that the learner first learns from the facts, and then the learning is reflected on the learner's behavior. So it is basically CDT, or the component display theory, is primarily uh, dealing with two issues, that is the classification of learning outcomes. Very clearly, classification of learning outcomes, what is that? That is context and performances. The second one is presentation forms, that is basically an issue, or rather a systematic order, how the learning will be performed. That means how the learner performs after getting some information, some piece of knowledge. So that means there has to be a model. Perhaps we can call it presentation model for presenting the elements. And then methodological prescriptions. That means there has to be systematic set of instructions which will help the contents to be properly transacted. So if we come to the first, which is classification of learning outcomes, that is content and performances, then we see that the contents, there are several categories of the contents. So the contents can be fact based, and the contents can also be slightly different, which are based on the concepts, procedures, and process based and also principle based. So we talk about the contents which are fact based. So we know what are fact based contents. These are those contents which are proved. So say for example, law of gravity, or we know that Hindi alphabets are 52, or we can say there are 5 vowels. We can say that New York is the major city of the United States of America, or we can say that Delhi is the capital of India. So these are facts, these are proven, these are already established. But at the same time, sometimes we also, we also take into those issues in considerations with regard to learning, because we have learning, we would like to reach to the learning outcomes. Those pieces of knowledge are basically concepts. So we know what is the heat concept, how does a vessel gets heated up when it is put on a flame. So there it's a concept, because the energy or the heat is transferred from the flame to the base of the vessel, and then it disperses into the whole body of the vessel. And when we put into the vessel some liquid, something like milk, water, or something to cook, then that heat is transferred into that particular item which is put in the vessel. So these are the concepts. So there is a concept of a transfer of energy. Similarly, we have certain sets of procedures. We know that certain things happens in a certain manner. So that is a procedure. So there are certain processes. For example, if you go to a book, there's a process how to select a book. So we take the book, we unfurl a few pages, then we see, oh yes, it has to have these chapters. Yes, it is containing these chapters, so it is suitable for me. Say for example, then if we talk about the principles, so there are certain set of principles, that is to do or not to do. For example, if you play cricket, then there are certain rules that when the player, the batsman hits the ball and the ball is going outside the boundary, then you cannot, if it is flying, not racing on the surface. If it is overhead, flying to the to beyond the boundary wall, then if you should not touch it. If you touch it and you cross the boundary, then instead of 4 runs, there will be 6 runs. So these are the principles. So this, this component comes into learning. Component display theory takes into considerations the various forms of contents, what are the nature of those contents, and how they help to formulate a piece of knowledge, a piece of information. So while designing the instructional plan, I think these are factors which have to be taken into account. And in a plan, maybe you can take into certain literature which has the factual information. Certain other literature has to be created which will discuss like process, the principle, the concept, or the precedence. But if we come to the second part, which is the concepts and performances, so what happens after we have detailed the first part, that is facts, on the basis of the hard facts or the proven facts, as well as the concepts which are there, the precedents, the knowledge which comes through the precedents, through the principles, through the processes. Then what happens? The learner would like to reflect those things, to perform on the basis of the knowledge that is gathered. So the learner remember, and maybe at a certain point of time, he or she will undertake the examinations and it will be reflected there. Then they will write attempt on the basis of whatever they have studied, whether those are facts, whether those are the knowledge is based on the facts or it is based on the concepts, precedents, or performance, the processes. Thirdly, the learner, what will we do? They will, derive or invent a new abstraction. So that means they will remember, they will use, and they will find. That means it will unfold a new knowledge, new piece of knowledge with this, with the properly designed instructional design that is based on the component display theory. So this was CDT. Uh, so maybe we will briefly recapture it because we have already discussed this yesterday. So we don't have much time to go now after CDT. What are the instructional strategies of and the CDT? CDT helps in the presentation. That means it helps the learner to present the knowledge that one has gained. That means one can say, one can explain that this particular piece of information, this particular piece of knowledge is based on facts. Why the objects uh, fall from the sky to earth. So we know that there is a gravitational rule which forces things to come down to earth. So a student can explain this. Then student can demonstrate how these things happen, and then they can recall. Recall means at certain point of time when they are not studying a particular piece of information or a particular chapter or a particular lesson, but suddenly a reference uh, comes, then the learner is able to recall. Recall means to relate and then give proper reply or answer to that, and finally apply. Apply means they can bring about new facts into life. They can apply the knowledge and they can bring out a certain other conclusion. So that means it is also helpful in creation of knowledge. So briefly we will go to the elaborate theory, that is ET, elaboration theory of instructional design. So we all know elaboration means basically expanding the thing. So this is expansion of idea. How do we expand the ideas from one form or one particular form? That means if you have an idea, then it can be discussed maybe more broadly or maybe in a precise manner. So this is basically discussing an idea either in brief or in detail. So the elaboration theory is one which is based on 4S. That is selection, sequencing, synthesizing, and summarizing. Very first is selection. What happens when we have the selection? That means we choose certain idea, and then we decide as whether this idea has to be discussed in the micro manner or in the macro manner. So that means it has to be specifically discussed or it should be discussed in a general way. So the elaboration has a sequencing implication. That means we sequence the characteristics of an idea. Means if there's a general idea or you know then how to discuss that general idea? Can we summarize it or can we discuss it in the micro manner, or maybe we can discuss it in the macro? That means in the world view we can apply the idea into the entire world and then discuss certain things. Say for example, if we discuss the Himalayas, Then Himalayas is, I mean, the nature, the vegetation, the geography, the flora and fauna of Himalayas. Then it has to be discussed particularly the flora and fauna that is found in Himalayas. But if we talk about the air, so air is a universal phenomenon. So there are certain phenomena which can be discussed or maybe on the micro level. There are certain phenomena which we discuss on the macro level. So this elaboration theory is basically based on certain principles, that is the optimizing versus summarizing. So either we optimize it, so that means we take into the place of domination, that means we take it into a very detailed discussion, or we discuss it in a summarized manner, in a very brief manner. The second very important point is the single type of contents. So, sometimes we have concepts of objects, events, symbols, and these have very typical characteristics and procedures and also principles. So then if we discuss a single type of content, that means like an idea, a small object, a small event, uh, by using certain characteristics. That means we talk about, say, football. But if we talk about football, then we don't discuss hockey, we don't discuss the bat or the cricket. How do we understand it? Because there are certain facts about it. It is around. It rebounds. It is made up of certain latent matter. Then we also know that these are facts. Then there are procedures, because everything which is around is kind of ball. Then there is a principle. It will, if it is hit to the ground by force, then it will rebound. And then if we punch it with some hard object, it will deflate. So this is the principle. So you see, these are certain notions which helps, or rather which are required to be built in the instructional plan. So this means that the contents have to be such that there is a scope for either creating new knowledge or to gain knowledge which is based on certain principles. So this is the notion of the CDT, component display theory. Uh, so we will move a little ahead, which is the we will discuss one more point which we thought yesterday to discuss. Yeah. This is a cognitive load theory and the cognitive flexibility theory, CLT and CFT. Yesterday we didn't discuss this particular aspect. So cognitive load theory and cognitive flexibility theory is one concept in the instructional design which helps how much load, how much burden you should put on the learner. So if you talk about the cognitive load theory, which is CLT, then the idea of CLT is, I think we have to first understand that cognition is not behavioral term; it's a psychological term. So if we talk about the learning in psychological context or in psychological terms, then there is a very huge impact of the psychology on the learning process. Any learning process is most importantly affected by the psychology or psychological aptitude, psychological happening. So if when we talk about the CLT, uh, then we have to keep in mind that the basic questions that CLT raises is the why there are certain subjects which are difficult, because if we say this particular topic is easy, or we say if this particular topic is difficult, it is not behavioral uh, or behavioristic concept of learning. It is psychological reaction or psychological outcome about certain concept, that these are either difficult or these are easy to understand. So we come with two three questions, with two three sort of queries in the CLT. So the CLT, in a way, it is very important. Reason being that if we do not consider the CLT or cognitive load theory, then what will happen? We'll put such contents in a vast quantity in one particular unit that the learner will not be able to learn at all. So that means we have to balance the contents in terms of their either easiness or simplicity, and also the complexity. There has to be some part, some load has to be there which is difficult to understand, and some part has to be there which is easy to understand. Because first, then there is a sequencing. So first we will put the easy part, then we from simple to complex. That is the approach. So if you might have seen that in all our textbooks, in all our study material, first we put the simple things and then we come to the complex, or the simple to difficult. So that is our approach. So the very first query that is raised about the CDT, the CLT, the cognitive load theory is that why there are certain subjects which are difficult, or why there are certain subjects which are easy to the learners. You see, we have to keep in mind that we are talking about the learning of a new learner, of a learner of a particular program. It is not about talking about the teachers who are already through a particular contents or a particular level of understanding. So there are some students why they are more motivated than others. You see, this second point is also very much psychological in nature. If you look at a classroom, if there are 30 students or 20 students, all the 20 students will have different attitude towards learning. Some will be very interested, some will be moderate, some will be least interested. Why it is there? And then we have to understand that the life situations, real life situations of each learners are different. So if the real life situations are different, then how can we, throw or put uniformed contents for the learning? That is why we have in the open and distance learning, it is the prior learning is to be appreciated. We talked just a little while ago, prior knowledge or prior learning. So prior learning has to be integrated with the present learning. And finally, we all know that all the students do not receive or do not manage the same level of grades, same level of achievement, same level of marks. Why does that happen? We don't have an answer, because it is a highly psychological question. So the cognitive load theory says you have to balance the contents in a way that it is from simple to complex or easy to difficult, and the load allows the learners to progress. It is true that all the learners will not progress uniformly, because each learner has his or her own capability, own attitude towards learning. So this is one, and we will go to cognitive flexibility theory. So now, what is this cognitive flexibility theory? It is as opposed to the cognitive load theory, which where we put the load. I think in terms of contents which are either difficult or very easy. So we have to keep a balance. So when we come to the cognitive flexibility theory, I think we have to keep in mind that there has to be options of learning. Some learners might like to learn from the study material. The other learners might like to study from the media. Maybe there are certain other learners who might love to study from the discussions with the teachers. Similarly, we have a lot many ways and means of learning. So the cognitive flexibility theory also asked or put certain queries. What queries? Whether the the instructional design which is we are in which concern we are talking, whether the instructional design that is there for the program or the learning allows the learners to learn from the real life situation. That is one question. Whether the learning design allows a learner to integrate the real life situation. Secondly, whether there are uh, opportunities to enhance the learning through the representation of the contents. That means if a learner is good at presenting the facts, presenting the case studies, then whether there is an opportunity to enhance the learning, and finally the facilitating the knowledge construction by the learner, whether a learner is allowed to construct his or her own ideas, and whether those ideas can be synthesized into the learning. So this cognitive flexibility theory helps and it helps in certain ways and facilitate the learning process more objectively. So it is the oversimplification of instruction. If it is there, then it can be avoided. That means uh, cognitive flexibility theory also prescribes that you cannot make the contents purely based on the simplified contents. You have to make a balance, maybe a little complex, little simple, little complex, little simple. The second implication of the CFT or the cognitive flexibility theory is that the contents must be presented in multiple ways to enhance the learning. That means what is enhancing learning? Enhancing learning is to promote learning by various sub methods. That means it should not be prescriptive of one particular method. It should have scope for different methods, different options to learn. That means if a learner is working, then there must be scope for the learner to integrate his or her work environment experiences. The third very important implication of the cognitive flexibility theory is the case-based instruction. This is important. All of us, especially in the open and distance education, even if we have younger population who is enrolled in a particular program, they definitely have, case-based situations. Say, for example, someone is walking home 20 kilometers to study. Then, how does one walk home? What are the uh, challenges to reach or to take or to utilize the public transport, and also challenges in using one's own transport? So, if there is a chapter which talks about means of transport, or methodologies of utilizing the public service transport, then these ideas must be, I mean, there should be a scope to integrate these ideas. So one can be given case studies that, okay, you visit the local metro, travel and find out what are the problems faced by the commuters. And more importantly, it should have scope for real life situations to enhance the learning, to integrate with the learning. Because what is learning ultimately? It is always not based on the assumptions, based on the principles. Principles are there. It is always said that, as I mentioned just now, that if the batsman is hitting a ball, then there are do's, there are don'ts. There are don'ts that if the ball is, simply flying over the boundary wall, then the player should not be making efforts to catch it, because if along with the ball one catches the boundary rope, then it will end in 6 runs instead of 4. So that has to be kept in mind. That has to be, there. The do's are or don'ts are there, but they don't always work. We have seen quite frequently that every player will try to the best of his ability to stop the ball. No matter it ends up in 6 runs or in 4 runs, one would try. Then there is such transactions do not strictly follow the principles, or they do not always be based on the precedences. Then they are not always bound by the processes. Things do happen, and we must be able to integrate that how these things happens, what are the implications of such happenings. And the cognitive flexibility theory, it has been found very effective in advanced knowledge creation. What is advanced knowledge? The knowledge which is which is of very high order. That means if we apply all these real life experiences with the proven facts, then we unravel new facts. So this is what the CFT, or the cognitive flexibility theory, allows, by integration of the prior knowledge, the real life knowledge, practical knowledge, case based knowledge, and subject contents which are presented in the knowledge which is emanating through the multiple ways of understanding. Then the concluded knowledge, concluded attainment or gain will definitely be of very high order. So the CFT is very important theory in the instructional design, because it allows to unravel new facts, new information. Spiali, are you there? So this was all about the block, this particular block of MDE 312. This was block 2. So we will, we will not go to block 3 today, because I don't find that there scope for taking the block 3 today because of the paucity of time. So I would just take block 3's brief idea as to what we are going to discuss in block 3. So block 3 is primarily dealing with the instructional design with regard to the media and the implementation of the instructional design in various situations. So we will go to the block 3 and just go through its contents, so that tomorrow, if you are through the contents, then we can discuss this more objectively. So if we look at the block 3, block 3 is the instructional design processes. In block 2, we discuss the instructional design, just design. What is instruction? What is instructional design? What is Gagne's 9 events model? And then what are the constructivist approach? What is the behavioristic approach? What is the component designs? And then we also discussed the very important issue, which is the cognitive load theory and cognitive flexibility theory. So these were relating to the instructional design. What should be there in the design? We also discussed the elaboration theory, and we discussed the component display, which is CDT. So these were part of the instructional design. Now we will come to the instructional design processes. What are the various processes which takes place while we design the instructional design, or while we put forward instructional design? इसको अगर हम हिंदी में यूं कहें कि पहले तो हमने इंस्ट्रक्शनल अनुदेश की जो रूपरेखा है वो पढ़ी, उसकी जो उसका डिज़ाइन है उसके बारे में पढ़ा, और ब्लॉक 3 में हम किस तरह से हम अनुदेशात्मक डिज़ाइन या अनुदेशात्मक रूपरेखा की जो प्रक्रिया है वो क्या है, व्हाट इज़ द प्रोसेस ऑफ इंस्ट्रक्शनल डिज़ाइन. So this block 3 has 5 units. So these 5 units discuss 5 different concepts in the unit 11, which is the ADDIE. So ADDIE is an acronym. What is ADDIE approach? I think हमने ब्लॉक 2 में MDE 312 के ब्लॉक 2 में भी हमने पढ़ा व्हाट इज़ द इंस्ट्रक्शनल डिज़ाइन. उसमें भी हमने देखा कि उसमें एनालिसिस, डिज़ाइन, डेवलप, इम्प्लीमेंट एंड इवैल्यूएट, ये 3 चीज़ें आई हैं, और ये तीनों चीज़ें जो गैगने का मॉडल है उसमें तीनों चीज़ें आई हैं, और साथ ही साथ ये तीनों चीज़ें जो है वो बेसिक, जब हम इंस्ट्रक्शनल डिज़ाइन की बात कर रहे थे तो उसके पर्पस क्या है, how what goes into designing the instructional plan. So there also we analyze all the resources, we analyze the objectives, we analyze the prior knowledge of the learner, and on that basis we prepare a plan, we design. तब हम उसी को डेवलप करते हैं, उसी को इम्प्लीमेंट करते हैं, उसी का हम जो finally we evaluate that. So all these things will be discussed. We will discuss the same things which we discussed in the block 2, पर हम उसको डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव से डिस्कस करेंगे. ब्लॉक 12 में तो हमने केवल डिज़ाइन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से उसको पढ़ा, और ब्लॉक 3 में हम उसको एक प्रोसेस के तौर पे पढ़ेंगे. एक प्रोसेस के तौर पे वो कैसे आगे बढ़ती है, जो एक हमारे डिज़ाइन की रूपरेखा है उसको हम पढ़ेंगे. यूनिट 12 जो है वो है लर्नर्स कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स एंड लर्निंग स्टाइल्स. ये काफ़ी इम्पोर्टेंट है, क्योंकि जब हम इंस्ट्रक्शनल डिज़ाइन की बात करेंगे तो प्रोसेस क्या है, क्या प्रोसेस हम अडॉप्ट करेंगे, क्या प्रक्रिया अपनाएंगे. सो दैट हैज़ टू बी डिस्कस्ड, बिकॉज what should be the perspectives of the instructional design. So perspectives have to be the learners characteristics. अगर हम, if we know that learners are Hindi speaking, हमारा जो instructional design है that has to be accordingly modified. If we know that they are well versed in English, and our aim and objective is to provide them study material in English, Then we have to prepare the instructional design, keeping in view the characteristics of learner. So learner's characteristics, I think we learned in the very first block, very first unit of the MED 311, where there are several characteristics of the learners. She is a free agent, technology savvy, independent, autonomous, you know, having prior knowledge, and so forth. So all these characteristics have to be kept in mind to build the instructional design. Then there are learning styles. We also discussed learning styles briefly in block 2, perhaps of the MAD 311. That means course 1 of MADA. There we came across that some learners are more apt to learn by visiting the classroom, by going to classroom. Some would like to learn at their own place. Some prefer to learn from the media. Some prefers to learn in peer group interaction. Some learners prefer to learn from the digital resources. Some would like to rely more on radio. Some would like to rely on more on television, and so forth. So the unit 2 is very important because after all, for whom we are going to make the instructional design. Obviously we are making the instructional design for the learners, so we have to keep all the characteristics of learners in mind. What are their characteristics, what type of learners they are initially, and then secondly what type of learning styles they are comfortable with. So when we come to the tomorrow, when we come to the detailed discussion on this, we will find out there are several styles of the learners. There are several learning styles of the learners. They have typical, the open and distance learning has typical traits with the learners. They come with their own preferences, their backgrounds, what we call the baggage with them. Then their expectations are very high. They expect the institution to perform slightly differently from the conventional education, and so forth. So all these factors we will understand, try to understand during discussion tomorrow, because we will discuss MED 312, the block number 3 tomorrow. And then we will unit 13 we will discuss the designing learning. This is quite interesting, designing learning. So we understood in the ED 312 MED 312 what is learning, and how to design the learning. This is important. So how we can make the learning properly achievable by an objectively framed design. So if we do that, then perhaps our learning will be more objective, more fruitful, more worthy. Krishna is joining. Krishna, are you joining? Somebody, hello, are you getting my voice?
Yes, sir.
So you came quite late today.
Yes, sir. I was late.
Okay, I understand. So we were just now discussing, we had this And now I'm giving a sort of a broad view or an overview of what we are going to learn tomorrow, what we are going to discuss tomorrow. So I was talking about the learning style in distance education. So some students, as I mentioned just now, perhaps you might have also heard, some would like to study from the study material, you know. They might ask for the ODL, the SLM, self-learning material, you know. So they would like to uh, learn from the study material. So how the study material has to be, that is there. So there are a lot of learning styles. There are different learning styles, like study material. And what is study material? It has to be having a typical style of presenting the contents. As I mentioned to you the very first day, we have a structure. You know, every unit will begin with a typical type of structure. So some would like to study their style is follow the structure. Some student might not like the structure. They would go to the textbook style, straight away begin with the discussion. Some would like to have illustration. Some would like to have assignments. Some do not want it at all. They might like to come to counseling session and study all about the study material, about the contents. They would like all the contents to be transacted in the classroom. So there are certain learners who are aged, who are adult. They study from their own way. They will study in the evening. They might like to have a class at 7 to 8 in the morning, or maybe 9 to 10 in the evening. So all sorts of factors are there. There are different characteristics of learners. There are different learning styles. There are different learning behavior. All these aspects have to be integrated in designing the instructional design, in making the instructional design. So then we come to a point which is designing learning. This I thought to share with you. Designing learning. What is designing learning? What is you see? First of all, we know that there has to be in a learning design. There has to be clarified or identified objectives. So, what if we don't have objectives? As I mentioned, our studies will go hayward. So, why there is need? You see, I am not talking, I am not saying, asking you, why are you studying? I am here talking to myself. At one stage, I am a student. At one point, I am a teacher. So, I am asking questions to myself. Why this thing is there? So, you must see it in that context, in that perspective. So please do not feel that I am asking a lot many questions to you or from you. I am asking questions, I am giving answers. So that is the style how to explain. So because you are designing instructional plan. Consider yourself in a situation. All this discussion is in the context of a learner who is designing a instructional plan, right? Krishna, are you listening?
Yes, sir. It's like, is it like, sir, administrator or LMS study material designer, administrator?
You are not administrator.
Not me, sir. The
You
objective.
are, you are learner here, and you are learning how to prepare
Study
uh,
material.
in study material, instructional, no, how to make instructional design.
Okay, okay. The entire design. Yeah.
Yeah, so consider yourself a designer for the instructional plan.
Okay, sir.
So you have to decide as to what to go, how it should be part of the study material. So here we are not giving a prescription. Here we are talking to ourselves, putting ourselves in a situation of a learner who is actually preparing the instructional design.
Okay.
So there are a lot of questions which we are asking from ourselves only.
Hmm.
Because if we do not do that, then we will not be able to focus. So if I don't ask myself, okay, what type of student is coming to open and distance learning, then I should be able to give answer. Yes, this type of learner is coming. So that means there has to be proper analysis of the characteristics of the distance learner, right?
Yes.
Only then I will be able to plan the design so that there is a scope for the learner to come, to integrate, to study. Because what is instructional design? That is a deliberate attempt to create certain situations within which the learner is encouraged to learn and achieve the goal.
Hmm.
Okay. So all these are the discussions point. If we discuss these points and understand these points, then we can build them. We have to bring straw from here and there and then make a design. It is just like a small sparrow. The sparrow knows what should go into her making a nest. So the sparrow goes and chooses all those small and very soft straws, bring them, place them in certain order, and then weave the nest. So it is just like that. You have to weave the nest. That means you have to prepare instructional design. But whom you are building instructional design? Obviously, for the learners, right? So you have to keep in mind the profile of the learners, their prior knowledge, their experience, their abilities, all sorts of parameters you have to apply and learn. Then you can, prepare an instructional design which will be helping to achieve the objectives or to attain the goals. So this is what is the and then we will also discuss what are the instructional objectives, what are the and how they should be put into finding the learning. This is very important. So tomorrow we will learn how to formulate the learning objectives. Have you studied a few units? Have you gone through the units?
Yes, sir. Little.
Okay, little.
Going through.
If you go to the structure, you see there are
Sir,
lot of
whenever I study, so it takes some time, but whenever you explain the things, it immediately get cleared. There is a difference.
So if you see the unit structure and of any unit, if you see the structure, the very first point is introduction, second point is learning outcomes or objectives. Every unit will have objectives in the beginning, right?
Yes.
But the objectives are different from achievements. This is a point. You see. So why we should have the if how to plan the objectives? This is a big question. Because if you are as a learner, as a distance education practitioner or maker of the study material, self-learning material, if you are able to identify the objectives, half of the job is done. Perhaps you might have reason after studying this unit, you will be able to say, for example, understand the concept of psychology, understand the areas of psychology, understand the functioning of psychology, understand the difference in behavior of different people. So these are the objectives. So after doing certain activity, you should be able to do certain things. So you should be able to understand, but it is not attainment. That means you have not become the master of the psychology, but you have gained a certain intrusion in the discipline or domain of that piece of knowledge that you are able to understand that, because we use the word understand, you use the word able to apply, then we use the word describe. We never say that after studying this particular unit you will become, say for example, if it is a study material of a management program, I will give you an example, and we are giving the there's a unit which is the uh, communication for managers. This is the title of the unit. So how we will design the objectives? We will say after going through this unit, you will be able to understand the nature of communication of the managers. Then we will say you will be able to understand the importance of the communication. But we will never say that you will be able to write letters after studying this unit, right? So there is a specific style of formulating the learning objectives. There is a specific language for to be used in while defining or writing the learning objectives. This if you go through the unit 13, it is very important. And taxonomies of learning objectives. You see, this is a word, taxonomies. You know the word. There is a word which is taxonomies. It is not a serious technical term. It is very simple term, because initially when we read it about 20 years back, 30 years back, we thought, oh, what a word, taxonomies. Taxonomy is nothing but stages in a process. Transactional stages of transaction in a particular activity or in a learning process. And then we have Bloom's taxonomy.
Yes.
Bloom's taxonomy is a philosophy which is there. It goes into a systematic manner. We see, we understand, we reflect, we use, then we perform. Like this. We will come to these stages tomorrow. Here I am just discussing in sort of giving you a hint what we will be discussing. So taxonomy word is
Sir, Bloom's taxonomy is a popular one, I think.
very popular.
Yes, sir. I heard.
How does a child studies? We will learn, we will read, I mean, we'll discuss it yesterday. Now this has been revised. Bloom's taxonomy, he gave a very basic idea initially. It is a stage, it is a study of stages. Taxonomy is study of different stages. So there are different stages in the learning also. So we will study about them, revised Bloom's taxonomy, and then accordingly we will also learn about the designing improvement or evaluating learning objectives. So this is important. Evaluating learning objectives. We define the learning objectives in the very beginning. This is the third in a structure. This is the third point or fourth point. Rather second point is introduction and then objectives or learning outcomes. Objective is one and same thing. Please do not get confused by objectives. Learning objectives or learning outcomes is one and same thing. In certain books we have used the word objectives, in certain books we have used the word outcomes. So please do not get confused with that. So uh, tomorrow it will be quite interesting, but if you have time, maybe tomorrow if you can join in the beginning and have a small go through the unit, we will be discussing it in quite in detail. So this is one concept which I love more. So perhaps we'll, because specifically the how to define the learning objectives or the instructional objectives, and how to design the learning. So designing learning is basically creating an environment consciously where a learner is promoted to achieve the intended goals. So we will do that. So, would you like to ask some questions today? Krishna, some feedback from you?
Feedback is, actually you explain the things uh, very clearly,
Hmm.
which helps us to understand better than from the given study material.
Yeah, but you see, these are we are only discussing it, but for a detailed study, you can follow the study material.
Yes, sir. We have to follow
And
that.
I would like to tell you because you are also working, na?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
We discussed the component display theory, and we discussed the elaboration
CDT.
theory, and we also discussed the uh, cognitive load theory and cognitive flexibility theory. Specifically, in your terms, I would like to make a comment on the cognitive flexibility theory. This is the theory which is very important in the instructional design because we the block 2 discussed the instructional design theories also.
Mm.
This helps to bring in experiences, like if you are working, there must be certain experiences with you. Those experiences are not just experiences, actually those are pieces of information. So the cognitive flexibility theory, CFT, allows that knowledge to be integrated with the instructional design that is being planned. So what I'm trying to say in simpler terms, when you write on these topics, try to relate it to your work situation, your own experiences, etc., and then build your answer on partly on what you study from the say for discussion in these sessions or from the study material that you have with you, and partly enrich your attempt by the experiences, by your working experience and so forth. So that is my request.
Okay.
And clearly mention that I have been working in this particular sector and I feel this way. Then add those things.
This can be included in the answer.
Because it is very important while we talk about, say, for example, the learner's characteristic. I think you are more better placed to explain the learner's characteristics. What is your style? You might not like to study by following the study material. You would like to study from the real life experiences. From the or you would like to go to sort of a discussion, or from you would like to study from chat forums, uh, from the peer group, from your friends, from or maybe there is some television channel which has lot of such lectures being telecast or broadcast. You would like to follow those because they might be particularly dealing with the area of learning which you are studying, which are there in your study material. So I'm saying that there are because our learners are not learners who are going to classroom. They are all of similar standard, similar approach, similarly tuned. But distance learners are each learner has his or her own characteristic, own style of learning, own constraint, and so forth. So my idea is, as and when there is a scope for integrating your learning, your prior learning, your experiences, your place of work knowledge, do not hesitate and then mention very clearly, I am working in this particular field and I feel like this, right?
Okay.
So we will also discuss the assignments maybe someday.
Yeah.
This particular assignments of MDE 412. Hmm. So in the unit 7 of the block 2, the elaboration theory is also a good theory because it talks about one particular point that I thought would be interesting, is sequencing. How do we sequence our contents? It says simple to complex or easy to difficult,
Mm.
and also sometimes we optimize it. We take the single idea into center stage of discussion, and sometimes we generalize it, sometimes we summarize it. So all this strategy goes into planning the instructional design. So we are in the MAD 412 is very uh, complex block, as well as very enjoyable, because if you become part of the contents, think yourself as a, not as a student only, think yourself as a maker of the instructional design, then you enjoy it. Then you, hundred thousands things will come into your mind. No, this should also be there, this should also be there. Of course it has to be tested on the principles, on the precedences, on the processes, but at the same time, open and distance learning is one such learning process, learning system that allows the integration of your experiences, your knowledge, your conditions, and everything that you have as an adult learner, as an adult learner, as a conscious learner, as a experiential learner. So my uh, I would suggest that you don't remain behind. You be very emphatic and try to integrate your knowledge there. That is
Okay.
my.
Okay, sir.
So with this, I come to an end. If there is any query, please come forward. Otherwise, we will wind up.
Okay, thank you, sir, for today's lecture.
Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Piali. Thank you, RC, also for giving us so much of attention and facilitating the proceedings. So we will meet tomorrow and we will discuss the block 3, which is the instructional design processes. We will discuss the block 3, instructional design processes, where we will discuss certain interest issues tomorrow with regard to the instructional design for the open and distance learning. So have a very good day. See
Okay,
you
sir.
tomorrow.
Have a nice time.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, sir.